Kia ora koutou. Welcome to this very special episode of Dirt Church Radio Aidstation Podcast. My name is Matt Raymond and I am solo this week. Ellie's in Australia preparing for UTA and I'm going there in a couple of days. And Andrew is engaged in a period of silent reflection after the 24-hour champs. He told me it was like a papal conclave, except the secret ballot was which part of his body hurts the most. We're recording this episode the day after Mother's Day. So we just wanted to shout out to all the mums out there and the aunties, nans, stepmums in maternal roles. To steal a line from the Beastie Boys, we want to offer our love and respect to the end. And special shout out for me today. Today is International Nurses Day, so shout out to all the nurses out there listening. We have a unique ability to make sense of and bring humanity to a nonsensical and inhumane health system. And I'm so proud to be a nurse, and I know every other nurse that I've spoken to is proud too. So again, love and respect. But this week, bringing to you a real special conversation and a timely conversation and a big conversation between Ellie Pottinger and Hanny Allston. Now, Hanny was on Dirt Church Radio 121 way back in 2020. She is an elite athlete based in Tasmania, was based in Tasmania, owned Find Your Feet Outdoors. She's an author, Finding My Feet, which is a powerful memoir which delved into lots of topics, including her body image, mental health, and bullying, which we don't often talk about in this space. But this conversation is one that talks about motherhood and it talks about the challenges therein. So navigating what it's like to be a high achiever, elite athlete, mover and shaker in the space, and balancing that, if there's even such an appropriate word, with pregnancy and motherhood. And just a heads up, this conversation does deal with perinatal mental health issues. Enjoy.
All right, welcome to another episode of Dirt Church Radio. And today I am joined by the wonderful Hanny Allston. Hanny, welcome back. You've been on here before, but obviously we just found out it was December 2020, so quite a lot's happened since then.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it feels like a lot, and yet probably looking in from the outside, it's so little, but it's so wonderful to be back here and to be able to sort of talk about the journey over the last sort of 4 years to 5 years or so.
Yeah. So I'm going to introduce Hanny for those of you who don't know her. She is, I don't even know which order you put this in. First of all, a mum now and a partner and an elite athlete. So she's got, I was looking at your credentials, Hanny. There's too many to name, but she was the world orienteering champ, held the record for 6-foot track. In 2016, she was Surf Coast Century 50K record holder in a time of 3 hours, 40 minutes. So fast. 2016 UTA 50K winner in 5 hours, 10. And I remember that you were just absolutely spent. It was amazing. And I didn't realise that you'd won our local marathon here, Rotorua Marathon, in 2000, was it 2008 or 9?
2008, I think I was living in New Zealand. Yeah.
In 2 hours 43, as well as like having heaps and heaps of amazing FKT kind of quite wild adventures. Hanny also plays a role at the IOC. Hanny, can you talk to us about that?
Well, I don't yet.
Okay.
But I've had an Olympic dream since I was 8 years old, and even the other day just found some of my old journals from back in the swimming days. And as an 8-year-old, I wrote in these journals, like, I want to go to the Olympics. And I can still remember like lying in my single bed at night and looking. We lived on a farm and you could just sort of make out the outline of the hills. And there was a farm up on the top of one of the hills that the lights looked like the height differences of an Olympic dais. And so I think that dream has kind of always been with me. I got close to it when I was in 2011 working at the Australian Institute of Sport in the lead up to the London Olympic Games and Paralympic Games. But a lot of time has passed, but nearly 30 years on, I've decided to relocate over to Switzerland. We live in 5 weeks. Oh, I laugh. I've got
Oh,
so much to do in the next 5 weeks. But,
sorry.
to study my advanced master's in international sports management and technology. But I guess the key piece here is that it's the only course ever founded by the International Olympic Committee. And Lausanne is also the home of the International Olympic Committee and almost all of the international sporting organisations and companies working in the private sector. So they choose around 30 students from around the world. It's very multicultural and taught in English. So I'll be spending about a year and a half studying the course and actually on scholarship, which is phenomenal. With this, I guess, this Olympic dream burning in me that I would love to not only experience what it feels like to be a part of the Olympic movement, but also because I have this really strong feeling that I need to make a difference to athlete well-being, but on a stage bigger than just in a one-to-one sense in the way that I've worked for many years now, and but more sort of like on a global scale, because I've always held this belief that well-being underpins performance. I haven't always got it right. I absolutely admit to that, but that when we now look at what athletes are experiencing on a global stage, we cannot say that the well-being platform is equal when you come from Australia or New Zealand compared to athletes from poorer nations, such as in Africa. So I guess it's a big dream. Maybe it's just a vision, but I sort of have this really deep desire to help support the movement of well-being globally. And so we'll see where it leads. Yes, it's a chapter about to open.
It's exciting, and I can imagine that there's probably a lot of question marks around it, like how do I do this, or how do I work with people to do this? And do you have any ideas about where you want to head with it, or how?
Yeah, so I'm a what if, like, blue sky thinker, always have been. Put me in a room of, like, in a boardroom, and I can often feel like a zebra in a room full of palominos. But I think, where this dream has come from was I actually did apply for this course when I was working in Canberra. I really enjoyed my experience working in the elite athlete sector, although obviously, with the way that I've gone in business, I also felt like a lot of that elite knowledge of performance was trapped in the performance sector and didn't filter down into the recreational field. But then my husband and I, it's a really difficult course to get into. And I thought, again, like, why me? What are the chances? And at the same time, we also had a vision for starting our business or expanding our business back in our home state of Tasmania. And so that was when we signed a lease to open our first retail store, sold our house, put all our life savings into that vision. And then I think it was literally like on the boat on the way to Tasmania, I found out from Lausanne that I'd been accepted into the course. This was in 2014, I think it was. And not only that, but a few months later, I also found out that I'd won the scholarship. And I was in this like juxtaposition of like, do I leave the vision and leave my husband, or he was then my partner, in Tasmania, and sort of strive forwards and try and realize this Olympic dream, or do I commit to what I've already started, which was the vision of Find Your Feet and our relocation back home to Tasmania. So I ended up turning the scholarship down. They said to me at the time, like, are you sure? Like, no one's ever turned down this scholarship. And it was a really hard decision, but I stuck with my guns and my gut feeling, and that was to stay in Tasmania. But that dream, it's kept simmering, and the pond here in Tasmania is so small. Being so blessed to call myself an athlete, raised and sort of fed by the state of Tasmania, which I so close to my heart. But I think to kind of realize these sorts of ambitions and aspirations, I think I need to be closer to the heart of it all. And I think what I've learned over time is that probably my greatest learnings have come from interactions with people and the conversations that are so subtle, they're often the things where you get the greatest spark. So I felt like it's not just about what I learn in the course, but I think it's about what I learn on the journey of growing as a human in this new chapter of our life, but also in connection with a different culture and hopefully like more a like-minded tribe, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think my approach to it is just to be an open listener and a sponge. Um, I think that it's really important to to go into new endeavors and new chapters, even parenthood, sort of in a state of open-mindedness and expansion rather than restriction. So yeah, I think that's my approach, and I think that the answers will come if I'm willing to do that and to be vulnerable in that feeling of unknown.
And thinking about it now, there's so much more that you're adding to your, you know, CV, for want of a better word, but you're going into it now with parenthood, you're going into it with business experience and interactions with, I'm sure, thousands and thousands of people. So you're kind of bringing this plethora of different experience that's going to serve you so much more with that study and that role. So I can't wait to see where you go with it, Hanny. It's going to be awesome.
Appreciate that, Ali. Thank you very much for your support.
So we had this really cool, and I was really felt so just, I don't know, honoured that I got to catch up with you at Konanyi, and we had a bit of a chat at the finish line and kind of talked about becoming a parent, and you'd mentioned that you'd had a bit of postpartum depression after your last baby boy, and I thought, you know what, it's great to hear from that from you, that honesty, and to be able to have a conversation like that and to be brave and put it out there, because I think we need to have these conversations. We need to destigmatize things and to even just raise, and I know, I feel like these are all kind of cliches, raise awareness, but actually hearing from people is so important. So I thought, I thought, can we have a chat about, your life postpartum, how things have changed for you? Has there been a shift in your running? Talk to me about mental health. So, yeah, I'd love to hear from you, Hanny, about that if we can.
Thank you, Ali. I actually feel really honoured that you're willing to listen, because I think you're right about the stigma. I think we all understand that postpartum depression is, a real thing, but that doesn't mean that we actually discuss it and share it. We were quite slow to the idea of becoming parents. I think, we had such a rich life and were so in love with each other and the journey that we were on that it was sort of hard to picture how you could expand your love to include someone else without losing love for the things you loved, if that made sense. So it took quite a while to fall off the top of the fence and make a decision. And I think we had the approach that we would let nature take its course. And, if it happened naturally and organically, then, we would embrace parenthood. And if it didn't, we weren't going to fight our systems. And it actually happened instantly for us, which meant that we weren't just falling off the fence. We were totally thrown off the fence. And I think my experience, I've now got two boys, one just turned 4 and one just over 1.5 years old, which I also giggle about because I think somewhere along the line a friend or someone must have said, I think you'll be a lovely mum, and I can just imagine you raising a girl. That when I fell pregnant, I just instantaneously had a picture of raising a girl. I didn't have a preference. I just had this sort of leniency towards this vision. And then when we found out that we were raising, especially with our first one, a boy, I just giggled for days. And I was like, I can't picture him in the bath and I can't picture teaching him how to wee. It's just like, it's just so silly now looking back, but now we've got 2 boys, but I just absolutely adore it. But I think the journey with both of my boys and the pregnancies and the postpartum was extremely different.
Mm-hmm.
The first time around, it's difficult because you don't really have an understanding of what you're going into. It's just like feeling your way forwards, and you're so in awe of kind of the whole experience of being pregnant and seeing this little thing grow inside you, and then, the birth and the postpartum experience. But I think in that first term or experience, you have a lot more time, a lot more, there's still when the baby goes to sleep, there's still time for you to kind of be you. So the adjustment is big, but for me, it wasn't as astronomical as it was with the second child, the second pregnancy, and then the second child. And then, when, your baby would go to sleep, you still were in the care of, a 3, well, at that time, 2-year-old and then 3-year-old. And so for me, we raised 2 boys somehow that never slept at night. I've had 4 mother-baby unit stints, which is the hospital support for young moms. And so for me, I think it was a combination of growing fatigue, having not really slept at night for 3 years, and then being pregnant, and then having another baby, and then trying to chase a 2.5-year-old around while you're recovering postnatally from a second child. I can't really explain it, but I just think it was just this snowball of strain and load that came. But I think sort of the thing I'd mention about my experience postpartum, particularly with Anthony, was that it wasn't actually a postpartum depression. I think it was something that started the moment he was conceived. I just had this sudden massive shift in sense of self and togetherness. And I can't really pinpoint it in any other way, but I just did not feel right. And I kept going into my obstetrician, and she was wonderful and so supportive. And we just had not only a huge challenge in finding help, because a lot of the help is postpartum, and getting access to psychology post-COVID became really difficult. But also, in my own time, trying to do my own homework on it, I just really couldn't find anything about antenatal depression, which is real and is a thing. And so I guess at that sort of first pregnancy, I guess I dealt with it more about being me and finding me and the excitement of growing this child and raising this child. But the second one, I honestly just felt like I was drowning. I had very little memory of my first 12 months with Anthony, which was really hard. The bonding was a lot harder with Anthony. He was resuscitated just after birth, so it was also a trauma associated with that. And then it became this feeling of putting myself down, that I wasn't okay as well. So then feeling like I had to be okay, and then not being okay and had to be, and I just got into this spiral. So I've done a lot of work, and I'd love to say I'm great now. I think I'm on the way to being great. I'm still, I think, finding my feet again. I think what I've learned though in this postpartum journey was also the summation of life can also present itself postpartum. And for me, it was antenatally as well with Anthony. And by that, I mean that I had an amazing upbringing, but I also had a very difficult upbringing with quite a lot of trauma that I thought I had processed, but it wasn't until becoming a parent that I realized I actually hadn't processed it in a way that was helpful for me now, as who I was now and as a mother. And that really caught up with me. And it wasn't till about 12 months postpartum with Anthony, my second child, that I was diagnosed with quite severe PTSD, and that they felt that my experience of depression antenatally and postnatally wasn't just a typical postpartum depression, but it was more like a rearing of a PTSD head that came because the coping strategies that I had always used, enjoying running and downtime and yoga and meditation and all these things that I had access to pre-motherhood, that you just, as your time and your energy just narrows so massively that particularly when you're sleep deprived, that these coping strategies no longer could serve a purpose, and therefore my mental state had slipped, which was really interesting. So I guess, a long story, but what I guess the summary of it is I'm so grateful for this
Mm-hmm.
experience, because I think that I'm ultimately going to be such a stronger and, I would say, better human being for it, because I will be learning so much more from the journey that I've been on, and therefore applying that going forward.
Yeah, because it will have always been there, but I can understand how that kind of running and all those other things can just help you keep your head above water, and without probably even realizing that that is what it is. But I'm also thinking, like we, historically people have said things like, "Oh, just think happy thoughts," or that sort of stuff. But there's massive hormonal changes that take place, and it's it can feel quite overwhelming, right? When you're having these shifts and you don't feel right in yourself, but you don't know what exactly it is, but it just doesn't feel quite like you. Or, the things that are happening to your body don't feel like you or how you normally do. So I can appreciate that. And I think too, so did therapy help, like working with the psychologist, or what's kind of helped you get through this patch?
Yeah, it's really, really great question. And I love that. I love what you also say about all the shifts that you have to adjust to. Like you go, it's sort of like this going into it and a crescendo around pregnancy, but then there's this whole, journey that you go on afterwards as well. And then you add another pregnancy and it starts all over again, but with like a different height profile to it all. I think probably the biggest thing that helped me was having the vulnerability to eventually say, like, I am not okay. And I need you to know that it's okay to not be okay, because I've always been someone that I would say has prided herself in having my ducks lined up, and and I also had to say to my obstetrician, like really early on, even with Nicholas, like, I need you to see me as Hanny, as the human, not as the athlete. Because if I'm seen as an athlete, I'm going to have this feeling like I have to live up to an ability to tolerate pain, to look a certain way, to be a certain way, when I don't know what this journey is going to take. And I said it to her in both my pregnancies. But it was extremely difficult for me to admit that I was not okay. And it was actually more difficult to admit it with the people that I loved around me. So, my husband and my family, because, yeah, again, I think I'd always had this vision of myself as being together. But yeah, now, like the stints in the mother baby unit, the first two I did with my first son, who never slept at night at all, they were easier in some ways because he was the admitted patient and I was the mother that came in to support him learning how to sleep, which didn't particularly work with him. He didn't sleep for about 3 years. And but with the second son, I had said to myself, like, I don't think I should go back or will be allowed to go back there, because I've had a child. I know what to do. I have to do the work. I've got to make him sleep. And at that time as well, the big mother baby unit in Tasmania closed, and an emergency unit had been established in the Royal Hobart Hospital, which is a public hospital, but it had 2 beds. So it had gone from, 20 beds to 2, and that was to serve every mother in Tasmania. So, it's a high needs case. And someone said to me, I think you need to, I want to put forward a referral for you to be admitted to the mother baby unit, and you're the patient. The child comes with you, but it is about you. And that was really hard to hear. So, and then having to go through so many interviews about, for admittance and whether or not, you were truly a candidate for it. And then at the end of the interview, which I thought would take 15 minutes, it was about 2 hours long. They said, we want you to come in tomorrow. And that was probably about as low as I went. It was like, even then I went home and sold it to Gray, and my husband at the time was like, oh, Anthony's not sleeping and we need to go back to mother baby unit. And I couldn't say, I'm not coping. This is as low as I get. Like, I need to do this for myself. And that took quite a lot of work to kind of get to that point. But so that's kind of like as low as I went. That was around Anthony being about 6 months of age. And then, now 12 months on, it was about then finding the right people around me to kind of to lift me back up and to do the work. And that took a while. I think, it was about finding someone again that understood my backgrounds as, particularly as an elite athlete, because you bring that with you towards your understanding of wanting to exercise and not control your body, but revel in what your body can do going forwards. But now I was in this different place of motherhood with the restrictions and desires to just be a different human, to be a mum and to understand all of that. So it took me time to find the right people. And now, I work with the most amazing psychologist. And it's about, really thinking about where we're at now, but also, what I've learned and what I'm going to bring forward from my past. And good and bad. So, or good and hard, I should say.
There's a couple of things that kind of spring to mind with that. And I think being an elite athlete and business owner and all that sort of stuff, you've got so much control and it's generally within your control, right? Like you can, but then you throw this other curveball of a child who doesn't sleep and you're not in control anymore. It must be so tricky to have that experience and then to move forward with it. And especially when it kind of got to the point, like for the with Anthony, with the first one, it's a problem with him. And then the second one, oh no, this is actually, it's about me. That would have been really challenging to get your head around, I can imagine. And then
it is hard because at the end of the day, I guess now in my mind's eye, I have this label of being a mental health care patient in a hospital system. But I'm not seeing that at all as a negative anymore. Like I am immensely grateful for that experience. And I'm immensely grateful for the experience of pregnancy and postpartum. I've learned a lot too about the human body, and I now bring that into how I coach, into how I enjoy my physical fitness and well-being as well. So I think it's just had so many blessings that have come through it. And it's been extremely difficult in times, but it's also been so rewarding, and the rewards are definitely outweighing the challenges now for me. Yeah.
I think it takes so much bravery to ask for help, like especially when you're somebody who's, independent and driven, and to go, actually, I need help, but I'm willing to, work and learn. It's something that should be celebrated and something to be proud of, I think, but because, probably a lot of people don't, and it's to their detriment.
Yeah, or they seek help, but they seek it through similar channels or through the same identity of which they've always lived their life. So it's sort of like doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So to me, every time I met with someone who potentially was going to become part of my support crew moving forwards, the first thing I had to say every single time is, I need you to just see me as Hanny. I need you to wipe the slate of like who I was or what I've achieved and how I've lived my life, because some of those things served me, definitely, but they're not necessarily serving me now. So we need to kind of start with who I am right now in these shoes. And that was when I started to feel like the progress was being made. And that's something I've brought through into my coaching now, is like, someone might come to me with a great aspiration, but the first thing I'm doing is like, who's the human at the heart of this endeavor, and how are they, what's their, what I would call wheel of life looking like? Are there broken spokes, or are they coming to me with a genuinely strong sense of authenticity and well-being. And I think if you get that bit right, then, the performance begins to be kind of a byproduct of that well-being state. And it begins about, adding the science and adding the strategies. But if you jump straight to the strategies and science and the goals, but the human at the heart is rocky, you begin to try and stick band-aids over gaping wounds. And that's kind of, it's just not a place that is sustainable in the long term. You might get some short-term gains, so sometimes you got to kind of rip off all the band-aids and go back to the beginning. And it's so amazing that work, just that true feeling of a butterfly being born, in clients, but also, I felt that in myself. And it's actually such an incredible feeling that I wouldn't want to go back to those dark places to feel that again. But it is a fairly amazing feeling of awakening, Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I've had similar with my coaching before, and thinking, why is this athlete getting to this point where it gets tough and they can't push on? But it's because they've got all this other history that needs dealing with. So I can try and give them sessions that could, create some resilience, but there's too much to deal with there. So then they got help, and to now see them being able to get through those tough times was really rewarding. But I can totally appreciate that. And I think it comes with that honesty and being holistic alongside the scientific approach. It's really, and that's where you'll bring so much to the table when it comes to that wellness perspective, because you see it all the time in different sports. Like, we just had a big inquiry in Cycling New Zealand with the death of Olivia Podmore and things like that. So having a wellness focus or priority to sport internationally is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think you can't always pick the people, like how someone is going from an external superficial level, probably until you've been in it yourself, and you get pretty good at reading between the lines of like, what are the tricks that are masks of strength as opposed to true strength. So I actually, in this, I think, you can talk postpartum, but it's so the same conversation really is preparation for athleticism. But postpartum wise, there'd been people that I had been friends with or had somewhat followed and connected with on social media, for example, that pre-pregnancy and children, seemed like genuine, positive, supporting friendships or relationships to have. But once I was in a postpartum state, I realized just were not great models of excellence for me. We all have our different needs as parents going forward, but for me, what I never wanted to do was to be in a point where I was putting my need for exercise and attainment and growth ahead of the development of my children. And I very quickly developed a belief in my primary purpose as a mother was to have strong attachment to my children. And that became even more relevant when Anthony came along, and I didn't get that immediate natural attachment to him. And so, I ended up like defriending and defollowing a lot of people on social media so that I reduced the noise content down in my brain and was able to really primarily focus in on the children. And in doing that, that one of the best things for me has just been a rebirth of what adventure means. Like pre-children, I sort of, there's been so many amazing experiences and adventures that I'd started to get a little bit of Groundhog Day creeping into sport and running and playing, and still kept starting to go, oh, what next? Where does this go? And it was getting a bit crazier and more remote, for example. And then the children came along, and suddenly the adventure muscle almost had to be completely rewired. And it became not about what can I do, but what are we doing? And just this morning, I was thinking about this in reflection to this podcast, and I was running down the road with a running pram, and this is quite a major road down off Mount Wellington that all the tourist traffic and tradies drive up. And there's a sort of fluctuation between being on a bit of trail or happening to be on the side of the road. I had the running pram. I had my 1.5-year-old on top with his soft blankie tied around his neck, holding on and just chit-chatting away to me, with my 4-year-old, who's literally just turned 4, on his pedal bike, my big pedal bike, Mummy, it has suspension and brakes, riding down this main road on the gravel verge. And I even had cars tooting me because they're just so ridiculous, with my little 1.5-year-old's tricycle strapped onto the bike. But it was because I needed a run. They needed to play. Nicholas had to get to preschool. So it became how do you join all the dots together? And then I didn't even know how I was going to get home, but it was 10 minutes and sprint to the bus with a running pram with Anthony on top. And I got to the bus stop with 10 seconds to spare, sweaty, dripping, Anthony squealing. They were going on a bus. And then, 5 minutes later, we got off at the end of our road and went back to go and jump on a trampoline for an hour together. And honestly, it's not ideal training, and it wouldn't have been what I ever would have once expected to do. But it was so buoyant and uplifting the morning that I couldn't help but feel so full of adrenaline and dopamine for the rest of the day. So yeah, very much so that's become our life of how do we marry all the dots together so we all get what we need from it? And yeah, okay, we've definitely taken it too far at times, but then you learn from that and you bring it back to the sweet spot again.
I hear you. I feel you. It's I think for me, I've found that they almost teach you and help bring about more mindfulness again, because although your world has narrowed a lot to the small human that needs all the support, and it revolves around them, unfortunately. But fortunately as well, right? Because they have this awe and wonder that we forget about just in our day-to-day, just going out and playing in the garden, and it's looking at the rose or finding a bug or whatever it is, that we forget to take all these little moments in. So they bring a lot more beauty to your life as well.
Oh, damn right they do. And I would say stability too. I'd got to this point where I wasn't getting the fix by being at home too much. I was always on the look for where can I get that next, excitement from. So it was always feeling like I wanted to be on the road, never wanted to be at home. When you're at home, I'd often want to disengage, and Graham and I would often finish dinner and watch something on Netflix and go to bed, read a book, repeat. And now with children, I don't know the last time I watched anything on Netflix. And last night I was so tired, and my little 4-year-old comes up and he wraps his arms around me. He's like, "I love you, Mummy." And your heart just suddenly melts. And then he's he joking, wee, 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 and pretending to wee, wee on you. And I was just oh my God, this is just, pre-children, you just never would have had that opportunity to just giggle. And I've spent so much time at home in the recent times, but I just love it now because there's never a dull moment. And yet you're right, you just have to be in a state of mindfulness. You have to be calm when their emotions are flying all over the place, and you don't always get it right. But I think probably one strength that I have always had is an ability to reflect on what I would call not mistakes, but where I've fallen over my feet a little bit, and have an ability to reflect and go, what would I do differently? And that learning curve of being able to be present, calm, stable, authentic in moments of high emotion and flux has been such a gift for me, because I was the very impatient. Graham would attest to that. Very impatient person pre-children. So, yep.
So I'm keen to hear, obviously there is a shift in what running means to you at the moment, but what hopes do you have for your running with the future?
That's a really good question, and probably something I haven't really let myself really go there yet. Probably because also I'm one of those personalities that once I get something in my mind, I'm like a bit like a bee in a bonnet. I'm like, got to get it done. I think for me, my number one priority at the moment is building wellness and rebuilding a strength, not from a muscular perspective, from a holistic, particularly hormonal perspective. I've been in a state of like high cortisol drain and strain and needing to kind of almost recalibrate. And running needs to be a part of that. And I need to learn how to enjoy it in a way that isn't about straining and striving, but really enjoying. And I would have said pre-children that I had been at that place, but postpartum has just been such a big wake-up call to like, actually, no, I probably have always been in a state of really striving with running, even when I thought I was backing off. So I've actually got no goals with my running, although I'm trying to sort of find that sweet spot of physical wellness where I can still, be like, I'm just going to put Nicholas on the bike and we're going to run to that friend's house, an hour away or something, and he's going to ride and I'm going to tow him on the uphills and have that fitness and strength that I can really enjoy that adventure, but without feeling like, okay, now what's the next running goal? I think long term though, one of my greatest ever experiences was my multi-day running mission through the Pyrenees, where I ran from the Atlantic Ocean down to the Mediterranean Ocean over 3 weeks. So it was about 900 kilometers. And I just honestly, it was so life-changing as well. It's probably, other than children, probably one of the most life-changing experiences I've had. And I absolutely would dream to one day embark on another adventure that is of a similar caliber. And I also, though, in going to Europe soon, am really hoping to utilize that strength and fitness that's come from this journey and my running experience into other sports. And I'd really love to ultimately as well learn to ski, keep up with my children and my husband. So adding other sports, some mountaineering, some climbing into the equation as well. Yeah, but I'm also happy, Ali, to talk about some of the tricks that I found that have worked for me postpartum in exercise, if that's going to be of help to the conversation.
It sounds like you've got a really good perspective on how to move forward through this next phase of Hanny's sports, and which include your family and kind of continue to foster that love for playing in nature. And I hope that, I'm sure they will, but I hope that your boys really enjoy it too. I mean, how can you not, right? Like, they've got such a cool playground to be in at the moment, and an amazing one coming their way pretty soon.
Yeah, thanks, Ali. We definitely got lots of challenges ahead. One being my 4-year-old, who's quite sensitive to his environment, going into public school, French-speaking Swiss public school in August, when he hasn't been at school, really properly yet. So that's going to be one of them. But also too, it's going to be a change of environment for me, and I've developed systems and routines in this postpartum journey that have really served me as well. I've had the challenges, but I've also found some wonderful things that work. But to then uproot yourself and move yourself to a new environment, it's going to be like another whole experience of learning what works and what doesn't as well over there. I was going to sort of mention like a couple of things though that I did learn postpartum for people that are coming through as parents about not sneaky shortcuts, but yeah, things that have helped me to keep a degree of fitness going through this journey. The first one is to mums and mums to be, definitely not to rush that postpartum recovery. I don't know about your experience, Ali, but with 2 children, my first, I would say I did definitely. I was felt an urgency to get back to the trails and the mountain and the fitness and I guess the body that you had. And I don't think that served me at all. I think I had a much tougher time, even though the birth process was generally a bit easier with my first. Whereas the second one, I definitely took a lot more time and embraced just being with the child, but also, doing activities that were rebuilding and calming the nervous system down. And I think even though postpartum mentally I had more challenges, I think postpartum physically was a lot better recovery journey with Anthony. So that's probably my number one tip to begin with. But then, like, once that period passed, I had to do away with like rules that I'd had in the past. Like, I will never run on a treadmill. And we went out and bought a treadmill, a trail running treadmill, but that just means it has a little bit of spring in it. But and put it in the home office spare room that we had, because the ability for me to kind of get out the door when there's always a child wrapped around your leg, and the separation in these first 3 years is really hard for little children. Like, they don't want their mum to disappear, and they don't know where you're going, and they don't know when you're going to come back. So I've had guilt for sure, and shame as well. I would definitely say, of sitting my 4-year-old down for his lunch next to me on the treadmill and giving him play school while I have a run on the treadmill for half an hour. Uphill gradients, because they're so kind on the body and so good for the fitness. But I kept thinking, like, I could be in, Beijing, where my son is sitting in traffic, or commuting on a train for 90 minutes each way to preschool. Like, what can be more educational than a little bit of play school while he eats his lunch? And what's better for him, a mum that's a bit grouchy because she hasn't had a fix of adrenaline, or a mum that's, hot and sweaty and grounded again and ready for the afternoon? So that to me has been probably one of the greatest decisions I made as a parent, as was getting an e-bike, because often I had the feeling that I needed to, like, bust out the door, but I didn't necessarily need the exercise. I just needed the fresh air, the wind in my hair, the sense of adventure, the sense of movement. And so sitting on an e-bike with one or both children while they sort of tell you all about what they're seeing in the world, there was nothing greater. And it also solved all the parking hassles of parenthood. So that was probably my third tool that has probably have been the greatest value. And then finally was a really good bike for my eldest child, because now, like, even from an age of 3, we had a bike called a shotgun, little balance bike, but it has towing capacity. So we were able to go out and start adventuring together. And, you're stopping frequently to look at a mushroom or a worm or whatever it was, but, like, it just was such a joyous way to exercise and have fresh air and sort of sunshine together. So yeah, they were probably my 4 tools that I've used to kind of maintain my fitness and well-being through this 4-year sort of pregnancy postpartum journey.
I really like your first one, because I think it's so easy to see, because people blast it out there like, I'm this much postpartum and I'm doing this, and it makes you feel like you're underachieving, or your body's failing you, or like, whatever it is, you have all these thoughts that come into your head, like, how are they back out running ultras again, and I'm still finding that I need to stick around this distance, or
wetting my pants because I'm bouncing in the afternoon. Yeah, like, there are real challenges, and I hear the sense of underachievement. That was where I was also going with, like, disengaging from social media so I could
Mm.
re-engage with me and my
Mhm.
authenticity on that journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, like, there's the flip side to parenthood too, where you see these people doing these amazing things, like, I don't know, making Play-Doh or the things that I'm like, oh, I just need a little bit of time for me too. And so I think it's good that you've kind of able to rationalize or make these comparisons that are actually helpful, because often we compare in a way that's unhelpful for us. It makes us feel less. And so to go, actually, you know, like, this is a fine choice that I'm making, and these are the positives for this choice. I think people can apply that in lots of different areas of their lives, not just running or parenting.
Mm. And we were giggling before we started recording about like how neither of us had made dinner for this afternoon, and then you're 2 hours ahead of me, so like 5:30 kudos. But that was as well like one of the learning things was you're right. I was like, I'm going to be that. You know, honestly, I went into parenthood. I didn't know anyone who had kids. I was like, my child is never going to cry. This was with my first. My child is never going to cry. I'm always going to meet their needs. Well, Hanny, humble pie. Like, but it was in that, it was this like, I'm going to do everything perfectly, a schema that I have of perfectionism. And that was like, I started going out and buying like organic veggie bags, thinking I'm going to make everything from scratch. It's going to be organic and my child's just going to grow up so healthy and vibrant. Well, it pretty quickly worked out that like that it could work, but to a detriment of a whole number of other cascading factors that would sit behind that. And that honestly, like tonight, it was better that you and I have a damn good chat, get a sense of buoyancy of it, and go and eat cheese sandwiches for dinner. Like it at the biggest scheme of things, it was, yeah, it sounds like for you too, like it's been a journey of just reflecting on
Mm-hmm.
what serves, what takes away. And at the end of the day, for me, my primary value is about attachment with my children. And we can have just a good dinner, if not better, sitting, you know, around eating relatively healthy cheese sandwiches than if I've slaved away in the kitchen and when they've got home from preschool I haven't had the ability to be present because, you know, something's burning in the oven. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that sort of resonates through all the decisions that we've made. Yeah.
And you know what? Sometimes those are the most fun memories too, like those novel things. Like one of my childhood memories is moving house and having fish and chips on the floor. And it's obviously not an every night thing. And it's one of those things where you go, this is a big day. Let's just dial something out. And whatever it is, or call for help, or we can't be perfect all the time. It's just trying to do most of the
And
things
it's not
well.
fair to our children to try to be role models of perfectionism, because of what standard are you holding them to as well?
Yeah.
It's about finding that sweet spot in everything we do and being okay that the days inevitably unravel to a different outcome than where you expected them to land at the beginning of the day. And that often involves your ability to do the activities that you had hoped to do for yourself, but being okay with what you did and being open to reflecting on why the day went that way and what would you keep and what would you change if you could do it all again, because inevitably it will come around again. And
And also, where's the beauty in that too? Like, that's so applicable to a run and to a race. Like, we'll often kind of have exactly that sort of thing happen where you go out with this preconceived idea of how your day's going to go, and it's actually, well, this is how it's unfolded, and you know, what are the good points from this day? What did I achieve?
And being open to be like, actually, this is a whole lot better than my preconceived idea, you know, and letting go of that and embracing what's come. You're right. And because I have thought at times, like, I wonder what would happen if I now went back and ran that 100K at UTA again that I did in 2017, where my interpretation of it was a lot of struggle. And that was a lot of mental and emotional struggle, not so much physical, because I had such a preconceived idea of how it needed to be and how it needed to play out and how I needed to feel through it. And I think that the lessons of parenthood would just be so liberating if I was in that experience again. So I have had that exact thought, Hallie.
I think you come at things with a lot more gratitude, don't you, when
You
you
do.
get to do something like that.
Yeah.
And there's a whole level of different struggle and challenge that you've now got under your belt.
But I think too, one of the things that had held us back from being parents was so many people saying, "Oh, your whole life changes." Yeah. And I think we thought, "Oh God, we don't want our whole life to change." And I mean, yeah, I guess it does in so many ways, but it doesn't have to be like handcuff change. And last year we had this like Anthony had finally turned a corner with his sleep, and we had this desperate need to bust out. And we thought, okay, well, maybe we should go to Launceston, which is in the north of Tasmania by about 2 hour drive. And I was like, oh, I really want to be in an urban environment. So then it was like, maybe we go to the East Coast. And, the weather's terrible. And then it was like, maybe we'll go to Canberra. And then we're like, oh, the flights are just so expensive. And then it was like, maybe we could do Central, like one of our favorite places, Central. Say, it's fly season. That's not going to work for children. Then I was like, maybe we'll go to New Zealand. Oh, the weather's really bad and the flights are ridiculous. And then I suddenly, as a joke, this is like literally at 2:00 in the afternoon of a day when Nicholas was at preschool and Anthony was asleep, I said to Graham, why don't we go cycle touring around the Italian lakes? And there was this like moment of silence. And this is always the way with us. It's like once you get that seed of a good idea, like as in it would feel amazing, just ignore the logistics. It's like you just can't let it drop. And then as a joke, I got on my phone that and I said, the flights are quite cheap because we had frequent flyer points to use. And he goes, when are they? I'm like, tomorrow midday. And he goes to me, he goes like this, he puts his head in his hands and he's like, how's your bike, Ken? And I was like, I don't know. I haven't ridden it for 2 years. How's yours? I guess it'll be okay. And literally 24 hours later, we were in Melbourne ready to fly, or Sydney, I think we went through Sydney, ready to get on an international flight. And we did a month of cycle touring spontaneously. We picked Nicholas up at school. I said to his preschool teacher, I'm sorry, we're taking him out of school tomorrow for a month. And we did, and it was the best 4 weeks we've ever had together, let alone as parents. So it doesn't have to be a handcuff. Like obviously we were in a really blessed financial situation at that point, but it was just, parenthood can also be just the best ignition of spontaneity and adventure that you can ever hope for, I think.
That's amazing. You're making me want to check my phone now and see what flights are for tomorrow.
Oh no, it was great. It was awesome. And you didn't have to worry about children getting sick just as you're about to board the plane because we were all healthy. So we were just like, whereas every other holiday, I reckon we've like booked, this trip and looked forward to it. And then, damn, the kids are sick. So yeah.
That is amazing. I only finished last night watching Adolescents, which has been quite topical lately, and feeling kind of the responsibility of doing a good job of raising young men. And I thought I want to ask Hanny, what do you do and plan to do with your boys to help them grow into caring young men?
Oh, great question, Ali. I started watching that when I jumped on my treadmill one day to ease the repetitiveness of running on a treadmill, and I had to turn it off. I found it so confronting. I have reflected on it a lot of even why I couldn't bring myself to watch more than 20 minutes of the first episode of it. And I think that my approach going forward is about really focusing in on the attachment I have with my children. And that's not just being there physically, but it's really predominantly being a listener and observing and holding space for them. And I really believe that if we approach our relationship with each other with kindness. They will approach their relationships with kindness. If, we hold authenticity, that hopefully they will find braveness to sort of hold their own authenticity. If we show gratitude, they show gratitude. In fact, my number one value in life is gratitude these days. My son's preschool teacher, one day I opened the door and she always had tears in her eyes. I'm like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Your son just thanked me for cleaning up the kitchen after lunch today. And he's
Oh,
just this grateful little creature." And I was like, "Oh, wow, no, it does work." So I think it's
yeah.
about like, in some ways, I'm also giving myself permission to keep doing the work of being being me and being super comfortable in my own shoes, because I think that if I do that and Graham does that and we hold space together and we are united in our approach of parenthood, that our boys can hopefully see us as role models, not just mum and dad. Um,
Mm.
so I think that's kind of my approach. I'm nervous about the phases to come. I really am. Like, I think, what will it be like when they're teenagers? But I also think our other approach is to drown out all the noise. Like, we allow screen time even now, and we give Nicholas free reign of kids' YouTube and occasionally
Mhm.
watch over his shoulder. But I guess it's about holding trust, but drowning out that, half an hour or so he has a day with a plethora of rich activities that are going to enrich him and his experiences, not to a point of being overstimulating, but certainly of being engaging,
Mm.
so that it drowns out that noise. And then I think the final bit that we've found is allowing so much downtime and encouraging sleep even at 4 years of age in the middle of the day. So earthing time, so that, yeah, their little brains get reprieve
Mm.
from that really busy world that we now live in. And that's really served us well as well. We
Yeah.
find that the behavioural issues creep up when the children are tired or overstimulated, and that they've lost that attachment to their environment, themselves, and also us. So,
Mm.
yeah, it's about all coming back to a place of presence. And that's going to be really hard, that parenting approach, when we add in a full time study and keeping our business running when we're on the other side of the world. But, I think knowing that is the first step to, like, I guess, trying to achieve it when we're over there. Yeah.
Yeah, and still and prioritizing it. Hey, just
But I also think in that it's also about, Graham kept saying to me, like, how would you have felt if you had a mum that, was working in such an interesting and dynamic environment,
mm.
surrounded by so many people, like, doing really cool stuff? And man, it would have been really, really cool. So also, like, I think it's about us being elevated and escalated and excited by what we're doing, and the kids will also look to that as a model for the way forward. And it doesn't mean you have to be perfect. I think it means even more so you have to be imperfect and vulnerable
Mhm.
and open, without obviously crossing the lines of what children don't need to know. And it's going to be a constant learning learning process as we continue to grow together. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Um, Another thing that I know that we're both passionate about is women in sport, and I'm keen to hear kind of what changes you've seen happen through your career and what you'd like to see.
Such a good question. Um, I think predominantly my early experiences in sport were fairly male dominated. I think I was always constantly feeling like a girl running with the boys. And that didn't really shift massively when I went to work at the AIS. Like, often the people in positions of change making were often men. Even in our industry, which is more in the recreational sporting space in some ways now, for example, the people that are choosing the clothes for women to recreate in are men. So I feel like, though the movement is shifting and there's been definitely a really superb rise of women and celebration of women in sport in all levels, from athlete to official, But I think maybe the shift that I want to see now is encouraging more diversity that is not just gender diversity in sport, and particularly in the decision-making positions of sport. So if there was another area that I'm interested in as I sort of head towards Lausanne is like creating space for younger individuals with different ways of thinking to be able to move more easily into positions of influence in the sporting field. And I think that was also something that I've really noticed, not just in the sporting field, but in the corporate world in general. I, for a while, held a position on the board of the Australian Institute of Company Directors, and it was like, oh, just feeling like a zebra the whole time in that room full of palominos. And every time I applied for jobs, even in my younger years, I think I definitely had at times, the right credentials for positions, but being overlooked by people that had a deeper resume. And deeper resumes often come with age and maturity. So, but as we do that, we tend to kind of get the same voices in the room all the time. So I'd like to see, yes, more women and diversity in where women are coming from and their backgrounds that they're bringing, but also the just allowing the youth voice in, because they're the people that are going to be enjoying this, going forward, not us. So that would probably be, a huge change I'd like to see.
And they're the ones that are, kind of at the grassroots right now sort of thing. So we can reflect on our experiences that are at those ages, but it's changed. The world has changed so much since I was a youth anyway. So it is good to, I think that's a really important voice to have recognised, definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we could talk all day, Hanny.
I
really
know,
enjoyed this.
But we both have littlies to go and attend to. Ali, I love your approach. And I said it when I was down here, when you were down here in Hobart, but I've really been really inspired by your journey. You've had challenges that surmount parenthood, and yet you've been able to kind of, I'm sure you have your own struggles, in your own shadows, but I think that you've been able to provide a really beautiful role model for us as parents and people who want to be active and supporting and developing community. There's so many things that you're working on. So I'd say total kudos to you. And I hope that other women and parents can sort of use your experiences as well and what you're doing with the podcast to kind of grow and evolve.
Thank you. I hope that too. And I feel, I think it's important to share stories and experiences and just encourage that, the challenges that people face, but also the beauties that come alongside these things. So on that note, you will have told us your greatest run ever before, but I want to know now, since you've had 2 babies since we last saw you on DCR, what your greatest postpartum run has been, Hanny.
Oof, that is so hard. I just don't think it's mine. I think it's ours. I think that's a shift. The other day I had dropped my 4-year-old off at school, which meant he'd ridden his bike. I'd had my 1.5-year-old on the little shotgun seat in front of me, and we rode to school, which is about 8 kilometres for him, relatively downhill. And then I'd taken my 1.5-year-old after drop off to a local region called the Waterworks, where it's just really beautiful and you just can see the mountain, and it was a gorgeous day, and I just thought we'd have a picnic. So we sat down. He's so funny. He knows picnic and he'll just sit down anywhere, like middle of a sidewalk, middle of the road, doesn't matter. He'll just sit down. But he sat down and he's having his picnic. And then he just stood up and he just took off. And I at first thought, no, he'll come back. All right, he's not coming back. So I grabbed all the picnic stuff and tapped it in the bag and took off after him. And an hour and a half later, and he wouldn't let me help him, we were still running around and exploring the trails together. I reckon he did about 4 kilometres. He's 1.5. And it was just so uplifting. Like, it was just the best time I think I've ever had on trails. Knowing that both my boys had had such an extraordinary start to the day. And even when I tried to put him back on the bike, he didn't want to get on the bike. He had a 2-year-old tantrum at 1.5, going home because he didn't want to leave the trails. So, off the top of my head, that comes to mind so beautifully as an answer to that question.
I can absolutely relate to that. Sebastian runs along and he calls them wooden trails. Like he loves boardwalks for some reason. And he goes, I'm running on the wooden trails. And he'll just shout out trail running and he'll run and he's squealing. And it brings me so much joy because I think, oh, actually, I know what trail running's brought to my life and to lots of other people's lives. And it's so exciting to see him just playing and enjoying himself out there. So
yeah, for the exact reasons that they should be. Exactly, Ali. No.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for tonight. It's really lovely to be able to have a chat.
I really appreciate your just honesty, openness, authenticity, and the positive spin that you bring to the challenges that you've faced.
Thank you.
Yeah, and being such a high achiever and being brave enough to recognise that this is a tough time and I need other help is so incredibly brave. So thank you for being so open and sharing all of that and letting us into what's probably been quite a tough part of your life, but also a really great opportunity for change too, right?
Thank you, Ali.
That's it for this week's Aidstation Podcast. Dirt Church Radio is me, Matt Raymond, and my cousins, Ali Pottinger and Andrew McDowell. We are on all the podcast platforms. Thank you to our subscribers in the DCR Aidstation crew, and we will see you back over the next couple of weeks with all the Ultra Trail Australia goodness that you can shake a stick at. We've got specials, we've got interviews, we've got panels. It's going to be epic. Hei konei, hei kona.